really excited to launch our new series. We know anything takes any new endeavor takes a little while to gain a little momentum, but we want to start. We felt there's never been a better time to talk about inspiration, and we'll get into that a little bit. So our series is going to focus on inspiration and transformation, because that's the crossroad that we are in. And I think that we'll be in for quite a little bit of time. So welcome. And Jen, so nice to have you and me doing it together. Woo-woo. Kind of launching our new live stream, where we're going to explore the role that inspiration is going to play as we look to reimagine and transform into the future. And we'll talk about it in various ways. We'll have lots of cool guests joining us in the coming weeks to really look at different industries, at different roles, at different applications, how it's going to be activated, and it should be really fun. But would be nice if you could give us a little intro.
Absolutely.
How we define inspiration. What that means for us.
Thrilled to help launch this conversation. It is an important conversation. There's so much good conversation out there, and our lens of inspiration is critically important. So for some of you who are familiar with the framework in our book that was actually created out of over 100 interviews with inspiring leaders and inspiring teams and organizations, we define inspiration as a cross between possibility and invincibility. So if you imagine a Venn diagram where there is possibility, or the way our brains prospect into the future and think about different possible futures, at the same time, what's different about inspiration is that there is a heightened courage that occurs, a heightened confidence that occurs, and we call that invincibility. So when these two things come together, we're moved to take action in new ways. We're inspired to take action. There's a third piece of inspiration, and I'll just mention that what we know for sure is that inspiration is not a spectator sport, that it is not something that happens to us, but rather it's something that we engineer regularly. The most inspiring leaders, the most successful leaders, are designing how they themselves are inspired and how they inspire their teams on a regular basis. So it's very agentic, and we actually think about that as a deliberate practice, or something that you tee up on a regular basis in order to keep your inspiration quotient, or your IQ, we call it, high. So that's just a little bit about inspiration. One other thing that I think is really important to say is, sometimes people are a little bit curious when we start talking about inspiration during this time. And what we found in the interviews, and several of the chapters in our book really highlight this, is that inspiration is not just a happy, smiley thing or emotion or state. It's not always about positive emotions. In fact, some of the most deeply inspiring events and people and circumstances happen from very dark places. They happen from heavier emotions like grief and loss and injustice. And this is a time when plenty of those emotions are running. And, we work with lots and lots of teams in medicine, and, it's one of the most inspiring pockets right now out of incredible need and loss and tragedy. Are coming these shining exemplars and these shining instances of hope and possibility. So don't even get me started, Laura, because
I know. It's like
we're already at 12:10. Yeah.
I know. So we have listen, we're going to have a weekly series devoted to this. And so we are excited to be talking about it, because we happen to come to this world. Like, one of the things I love, and you often say this, and so I'm always inspired by thinking about what are things that are important right now, what are we learning, what's inspiring us, because we are not always looking, we're always looking for things that are inspiring us, but also the many ways that inspiration is showing itself. And we kind of teed up a couple of things that we thought would be interesting to share today. And So let's talk about the first thing that we think is really important.
Something that we think is really important right now is first things first. That's kind of how we think about it. And in all of our work that we're doing with folks on the ground, like leading incredibly big changes and incredibly dynamic teams, we start with first things first. What do we mean by that? We actually are really resting on a lot of good literature on what human systems need in times of high change and intensity and stress. And first things first, the best way to describe it, I'll use some work from Jim Lohr, who's a sports psychologist, and we use his work a lot. The Corporate Athlete is what his work is called. It's essentially how sports psychology and human performance relate to leadership in organizations. He uses a pyramid, and not unlike Maslow's pyramid, to think about how leaders work through energy. And first things first is really understanding what kind of energy you have on any given day, for any given meeting, any given conversation. It's that self-awareness about what you're bringing to the table, like what you're able to observe in yourself. He highlights 4 levels of energy. And for instance, in our team meetings, we actually check in on these 4 levels at a lot of our check-in meetings. The 4 levels at the base of the pyramid, if you imagine a pyramid kind of divided into 4 levels, is physical energy. That's the quantity of energy that you're bringing forward, right? That you have at the ready. The next level is emotional energy, or the quality of energy that you're bringing forward. What emotions do you have access to that can be generative and positive and contagious, or not? The third level is cognitive energy, and really important, like how sharp are you in terms of making connections? What is your ability to focus, right? And then the 4th level of energy is purpose energy, or your connection to the mission, your work, your organization's mission. Making a difference beyond yourself, essentially. Like, how much energy do you have? How much of that energy do you have flowing? So first things first is that self-awareness about your own energy levels, and then managing to those.
It's so, as we move through this time, it's interesting how this time has been an accelerator for things that we kind of all have always known, but here we are in a moment when these are the things that are more important than ever, ever before. In some ways, maybe some people might have referred to these as softer things, but they're not. These are the hardest things you have, the most impactful tools and opportunities that lay in front of you. And, first things first is about the individuals who are leaders, but don't you think it's also about their ability to make sure that all of their people, both, and this goes personally and professionally, right? The people in your world, in your sphere, that they also know that it's first things first for them.
Yes.
That I think is one of the most inspiring things that we've seen, is how leaders are doing that for themselves, but also how they're setting the stage for that to be a significant focus.
Yeah, and we see this at leader levels, where their leaders are taking more time and attention to do the one-on-one pulse checks every week, to really have that strong pulse on each member of their team, because there's so much variability in what people are experiencing right now. So it just takes a lot of customization in terms of leadership and connection. We see this at team levels, where there are new norms being set, not just new work streams and new ways of working, but like actual new norms. And Laura, you had a great example of this.
I did. You know what? So here's the thing. I walk with a group of women, and we're not walking together anymore, but I was speaking with one of them, and she was telling me in her company, and I don't have permission to use their name, so I won't, but she was saying how two things really have stood out for her. One is that every Wednesday afternoon, it's like no Zoom Wednesdays. So there is actually a directive that there shall be no Zoom meetings on Wednesday afternoons, and how grateful she is, and how they actually have been going into like people's calendars and looking to make sure there are no secret Zoom meetings happening, which I think is really great. And the other thing she was highlighting is that on Friday afternoons, they're being also directed to take Friday afternoons as a self-care afternoon, to actually do things that are nurturing, to invest time in, whether that's being with your children, whether that is taking time alone in nature, whether that is doing whatever things that you are passionate about. And I found it really inspiring to hear that an organization is making that kind of directive. And equally as inspiring was how she was talking about it, the level of appreciation that she has for her leaders that are showing that kind of care, and the kind of trust currency, you've used that word and I love that word, trust currency, that is being built because there's that kind of first things first approach.
Yes, I love that. You also just referenced tapping into what people are passionate about, right? And I know some of the best research on antidotes to burnout show that you have to get people back in touch with the things that move them, the things that they enjoy most, things that help them get back into a flow state when you lose track of time because you're so interested and engaged in what you're doing. Like you said, could be a walk with pets or on your own to a podcast or with your kids, but actually carving out the space. And I think an important thing to recognize here is everything we're saying, like Laura said, it's not revelatory. In fact, like we could say like duh,
right?
But there's a really big difference between knowing and doing. There's a really big difference. And so what we're seeing really works best. And I have some of the most amazing, brilliant, accomplished leaders that confide in coaching sessions and are saying, I have so much variability in my own mood from day to day and week to week. But what I know for sure is when I get out and walk, when movement is a part of my routine, I can't believe the difference it makes. Like it's so dramatic, right? This is first things first. The difference, being in practice and
yeah. I mean, I think, so our first series, really, we can just kind of sum up in that first things first, especially in this particular moment. This is not like leading through change under normal change circumstances where there's a beginning and a middle, something was acquired, something was, there was a merger, and now there's a change to lead through, and there's a beginning, middle, and an end. There is not what one would ordinarily define as an end. And so first thing first is got to be almost a credo, a leadership credo, something that is held as a priority and an actual competency, because it's going to matter. And inspiration is going to be at the core of it. So any final words on our first live stream? We're curious. I'd say we're curious about what you all have to say. And actually, if you'd share your first things first efforts and initiatives and the ways that you are finding and are being inspired to actually bring that forward.
I just unmuted everyone.
Yeah, questions are always good. Comments, insights. We love them.
I love what you guys are talking about. This is Sandra. I love the first things first. And I really like the one ritual that I have that is last things last, but closing the day with some just reflection on things that I am pleased about or grateful for from that day. Just 3 things end the day with positivity. It literally sits next to my bed. I write it and then turn in. And I really like ending my day that way and sort of setting myself up for the next morning with that.
I love that. I love the last things last as an entire, as an entire approach to end of day ritual. That's beautiful.
I would offer also that, there is incredibly wide variability in how much formal structure people need to be, really hitting that balance between managing all that they're managing personally and continuing to produce professionally. There's just incredible variability in how much structure people need. And right now, people tend to need more. They tend to need more. So, another really good best practice is supporting your team to bring more structure in, whatever that might look like. It might look like sharing weekly game plans, or in your one-on-one with folks, asking about how they're structuring their day and do they need more support structurally. It's an interesting time where we have lots of choice and autonomy, and in that, like, we actually have to create a structure that feels right for each of us.
And it can feel really uncomfortable to structure unstructured time, right? There's that whole notion of structuring time where you're not having to do anything at all. And that's a whole other subject, and undoubtedly we'll get there, but it's a great point to how to approach structure in general at a time like this.
I have to share personally, and this is going to be my last insight here, although of course this is like scratching the surface on
right.
so much of what we're hearing and we want to share. But personally, I'm finding it's more important within this new way of working, within remote working, to time block the times of the day where my energy is really best for certain activities. So when I was on the move more and out and about, I think it was easier to rely on that movement and that stimulation to carry me through to, do kind of whatever needed to get done at different times of the day. Now I do feel like, for really deep, hard thinking, I've got to catch it before 11 a.m. I mean, it's like root canal if I leave something really, really hard to the end of the day.
Hey, be nice to endodontists. I'm a daughter of an endodontist.
It's like bad root canal.
There you go, bad root canals. So anyway, we thank you so much for being with us. We are so excited to do this. And as you can see, we could go on and on and on, but we're gonna try to keep them short and tight and give you something useful, and also encourage you to share with us. So have a wonderful rest of your week.